Hey friends, it's Tomer, and today I'm back with another round of Doctor Who previews. Today, Wizards of the Coast has previewed the full deck list of the Paragons of Power pre-constructed deck, which is a teamer deck focused on the new Paradox keyword, which is all about casting spells from places other than your hand, which usually means casting stuff from exile or casting stuff from the graveyard. And we also got a bunch of new cards from the Grixis Masters of Evil precon. So I'm going to cover all the preview cards that came out today, starting with the brand new cards that are exclusive to the Doctor Who set, as well as reprints that feature new art and flavor text in the theme of Doctor Who. But before we begin, two quick reminders. First, you can find all the Doctor Who previews over at mtgpreviews.com, and secondly, you can pre-order all these sweet new cards over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. Alright, we begin with Me, the Immortal, otherwise known as Arya Stark. This is a 5-mana teamer legendary creature human rogue. It's a 3/3, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put your choice of a +1/+1 counter, first strike, vigilance, or menace counter on Me, the Immortal. Counters remain on Me as it moves to any zone other than a player's hand or library, and you may cast Me from your graveyard by discarding 2 cards in addition to paying its other costs. So this card looks like it's most suitable as a Voltron commander. The fact that it keeps the counters no matter if it goes back to the command zone or if it goes to the graveyard and you reanimate it later, like with its own ability, it means that it's very resilient to removal and it can keep chugging along. It's kind of similar to a Skullbriar. Skullbriar is 2 mana and it grows quite slowly, whereas Me can grow very consistently and can also be cast by itself by the graveyard and has access to a 3rd color instead of just 2. However, it does start at 5 mana, which is a lot. So I don't know if it's better than Skullbriar, it probably isn't, but it's still a very interesting commander and an excellent candidate for a Voltron commander setup. Next up, we have Karvanista Loyal Lupari. It's a 5-mana green, 5/5 legendary creature, alien dog soldier, and it has adventure. So the adventure side says Lupari Shield. You can pay 2 mana, 1 and a green for this sorcery adventure. That says humans you control gain indestructible until your next turn. And then the creature side is vigilance, trample, haste, and whenever Karvanista attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each human you control. So this is a cool, flexible card for a human deck. The adventure side not being an instant kind of sucks, but it does last until your next turn. So it's a good setup to make sure that if you have a game-winning board state of humans, that it's going to be very difficult for your opponents to deal with it with a board wipe on their turn or whatever. It also sets you up for a board wipe on your own turn. You could give all your stuff indestructible, then wipe the board and all your creatures live, so then you can immediately attack. And then if you don't need that utility, you can always just drop it down as a 5/5 Trampler, and it just immediately attacks and buffs up your entire humans. So this card is pretty sweet in a human deck. Probably not as the commander, but I can see it as the part of the 99 of a human deck. It's not a human itself, and it does cost a little bit more mana than I would like, but nonetheless, it is a very excellent inclusion in human decks. Next, we have Truth or Consequences. This is a 4-mana Izzet sorcery that says Secret Council. Each player secretly votes for Truth or Consequences. Then those votes are revealed. You draw cards equal to the number of Truth votes. Then choose an opponent at random. Truth or Consequences deals 3 damage to that player for each Consequences vote. So the way this reads to me is that it's like 4 mana, draw a card, and then your opponents will take 3 damage chosen at random, and you do that 3 times. I don't think your opponents are going to be just drawing you a bunch of cards. Either way, this card kind of seems weak to me. Not very good. I'll just pass on it. All right, next. We have the Master, formed anew. So this is a new Dimir legendary. It's just 2 mana, a blue and a black, for a 0/1 legendary creature, Time Lord Rogue, and it has Body Thief. When you cast this spell, you may exile a creature you control and put a takeover counter on it. And you may have the Master formed anew enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature card in exile with a takeover counter on it. So every single time the Master enters the battlefield, it could potentially be a new creature, but you have to exile that creature beforehand. So it works kind of interestingly with like blink strategies. It's weird. I don't know if this card is good. Is this card good? It doesn't seem good to me, but it seems very interesting. I'm excited to see what people can come up with it at the very least. It's just 2 mana, so it seems like it could be playable, but I don't know what I would do with it, honestly. Let me know in the comment section. Moving on, we have Auton Soldier. This is a 6 mana blue 0/0 artifact creature alien soldier. And you may have Auton Soldier enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it isn't legendary, is an artifact in addition to its other types, and it has Myriad. Okay, so this is a very high cost clone effect, but the upside is that you can copy any creature, not just non-legendary creatures, which is nice. It has artifact synergies, which is also nice, and it has Myriad, which means you can get a ton of extra value of whatever you copy. Like if you copy something with a powerful enter the battlefield trigger, you can get a bunch of enter the battlefield triggers each time you're attacking. That's really good. So yeah, this card isn't like very good in most decks, but in particular decks that have powerful ETB triggers, I would say, Auton Soldier is going to be super fun, especially if you have a commander that has a strong enter the battlefield trigger that you want to get more value out of it. I think Garuda is probably going to be the best pick for it, but other commanders probably will fit the bill as well. Next, we have Start the TARDIS. This is a 2 mana blue sorcery that says Surveil 2, then draw a card. You may Planeswalk, and it also has Jumpstart. So this card is actually pretty decent value, even if you're ignoring the Planeswalk part. Like Surveil 2, draw a card, have Jumpstart for 2 mana is not the worst. It's fine, especially if you're in a Surveil deck. I think you'd run it just for that. But if you're in a Plane Chase setting, like if you're running with the Plane Chase optional rule set, then this card gets way better, because you can just Planeswalk away from any plane that isn't really working towards your strategy, and you can always recast it from the graveyard once, which is also just extra value. So this card is very sweet, but I think it's going to be best in Plane Chase games and also Surveil decks. Next, we have Flood of Mars. This is a 4 mana blue 3/3 creature alien zombie horror. It has Island Walk. It has Water Always Wins. Whenever the Flood of Mars attacks, put a flood counter on another target creature or land. If it's a creature, it becomes a copy of the Flood of Mars. If it's a land, it becomes an island in addition to its other types. So it has Island Walk and can potentially make your other opponent's lands into islands. So it can make it give itself evasion, and then it can continually just turn other creatures into copies of itself, which is really fun. I don't think this card is good, but it's definitely a very fun card. And if you have like synergies with flood counters, then it could be more fun too. I think there's only 2 other cards, or like 3 other cards that even deal with flood counters, but it's something to keep in mind. It's just a fun card. Next, we have Sontaran General. This is a 5 mana red creature alien soldier. It's a 5/5 with trample and haste and battalion. Whenever it attacks with at least 2 other creatures, for each opponent goad up to 1 target creature that player controls. Those creatures can't block this turn. So it's a big beater. It gives pseudo evasion because it makes something unable to block, and then it goads. So that's pretty good value. It's still 5 mana though, but I mean, it immediately starts smacking. It's a pretty small hoop to jump through, as good in aggro decks. I'm not super excited about it personally, but it is cute. I like it. Next, we have Clockwork Droid. This is a 2 mana colorless artifact creature robot. It's a 3/1, and you may exert Clockwork Droid as it attacks. When you do, it can't be blocked this turn, and you scry 1. This is fine, I guess. It doesn't have haste or anything, but like it can make sure it can't be blocked. That's fine. I don't know. All right. Next up, we have Sycorax Cabander. This is a 4 mana Rakdos creature alien soldier. It's a 4/2. It has first strike, haste, and sanctified rules of combat. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent faces a villainous choice. That opponent discards all cards in their hand, then draws that many cards -1, or it deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. This card also just not very exciting. It does a lot of damage, I guess. It's a 4/2, immediately gets in there, maybe. It's still not that big, so even with the first strike, it's still a little bit dubious on attacking. And then it just deals a little bit of extra damage to your opponent, or wheels them a little bit in an inconvenient way. Not very good. Whatever. Anyway, moving on, we have Doomsday Confluence. This is a black sorcery. It's double X and a black, and it says choose X. You may choose the same mode more than once. Each player sacrifices a non-artifact creature, create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact creature token with menace, or each opponent discards a card. So if you put in 5 mana into this, so X equals 2, you get to make each player sacrifice a non-artifact creature and then make somebody discard a card and make a Dalek. Like That doesn't seem very good. But it does. I like the fact that it specifies non-artifact creatures. So if you're in an artifact deck, the first mode is going to be pretty darn sweet. But still, like even for 3 mana, it's not worth it. And then making like a Dalek and having somebody discard a card is like, hey, it's not good. Whatever. Moving on. Great Intelligence's Plan. This is a 6 mana Dimir sorcery. It says draw 3 cards, then target opponent faces a villainous choice. They discard 3 cards, or you may cast a spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now, this one actually seems pretty playable of the ones we've seen so far. So 6 mana, you draw 3, and then most likely you're going to be able to cast a spell for free. That's kind of worth 6 mana. Like most often, people are going to be greedy. If you say insert person, discard 3 cards, unless they have a really full hand, like if they have like 15 cards in hand with a reliquary tower and they have like a bunch of lands to discard or whatever, then sure, they'll discard some cards. But I think most likely if you target somebody who has like only 5 cards in hand or something like that, they're not going to be discarding 3 cards. So you just immediately get to cast something for free from your hand. It could be a lot of mana too. Like you could just like cast an Omniscience from your hand if you happen to have one. So this card actually seems quite playable, I would say. I would have to test it out, but I think so. Like you just target somebody who doesn't have enough cards to discard, and you get to draw 3 and then cast something for free from your hand. I think that's worth 6 mana. Next, we have another legendary creature. This is the Rani. This is a 4 mana Grixis legendary creature, Time Lord Scientist. It's a 3/4, and it says whenever the Rani enters the battlefield or attacks, create a red aura enchantment token named Mark of the Rani attached to another target creature. That token has enchant creature, and enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded. And whenever a goaded creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, investigate. I think the Rani is actually a pretty powerful commander. I think goad is fairly undervalued in Commander in general. Basically, goading a creature means that it's going to be forced to attack, and it's forced to attack someone who isn't you. So that's going to force attacks that the controller otherwise might have not done. And also it kind of gives you life gain in a way. It's damage prevention because those attacks could have went at you. And if you target like a utility creature that's small, it probably will have to run into a blocker and then die. So it's like pseudo removal in that way. Any way you slice it, it's a lot of value for you. So I really like Goad as a mechanic. I think the only downside with Goad is that opponents psychologically do not like it when their stuff is goaded. I'm speaking that from just personal experience. People don't like it when you're forcing them to do things. So once the goad effect is gone, most likely that opponent is going to try and attack you with the ungoaded creatures as much as possible. But nonetheless, I think goad is still very powerful. More powerful than most commander players give it credit for. And I think the Rani is actually a good one because oftentimes when we have a goad commander, the goad commander is only working if the commander is on the battlefield. But this goad effect is intrinsic to the token that she's creating. So even if the Rani gets removed from the battlefield, as long as Mark of the Rani is still on that creature, it's still goaded. So that's really nice. And then you get to investigate, which investigate isn't like super powerful by itself, but it is an artifact token, and you can do a lot of things with artifact tokens. You could tap them for mana, you can tap them to draw cards, you can do a bunch of broken things with artifacts. So making artifact tokens in itself, even if you couldn't crack it for 2 mana to draw a card, is still intrinsically good value. So I think the Rani is actually good for 4 mana. Grixis Goad is actually, it looks legitimate because ETB trigger and attack trigger. And it still works even when the Rani's on the battlefield. So overall, I think my favorite commander so far from at least today, of the ones that we saw so far. How about that? All right, moving on. We have Delete, and I like this card because it's so short and simple and cool. Delete is a mono red sorcery. It's X and double red for a sorcery that says deal X damage to each non-artifact creature and each player. Short and sweet. This is an earthquake effect, and it deals damage to all creatures and players except for your artifact creatures. So if you're in an artifact deck, which Delete goes into the precon that's Masters of Evil, it has a Cybermen theme, and Cybermen are all artifact creatures. It's a great way to be an asymmetrical board wipe. So if you have a bunch of artifact creatures in your artifact deck, it's not going to deal damage to your own creatures, which is awesome. And it can also double up as a finisher. If your opponents are at like less than 10 life later on in the game, you can probably generate enough mana to deal enough damage to take out your opponents if you're at a higher life total. And also the Cyberman kind of looks like Iron Man. That's kind of cool. All right, so I like this card. But now we're going to move on to a card that I like even more. This is Last Night Together. This is a 5-mana Gruul sorcery that says choose 2 target creatures, untap them, put 2+1/+1 counters on each of them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase. Only the chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. Now this card is sweet because Stompy decks usually just have 1 or 2 very big creatures. Extra combat phases are incredibly powerful in Commander. It means you can take out multiple opponents in the same go. So for 5 mana, being able to do all that and then make sure the creatures have vigilance. So if there's anybody still alive afterwards, you still have blockers for a backswing. This card is just solid. I would love to put it in like my Xenagod deck, for example. Like you play Xenagod, you play a big creature, you pump it up with Xenagod, you swing with both of them, and then you take an extra combat phase, you pump up a creature again, double its power yet again with Xenagod, and you swing for even more damage. Like, oh my, this card is gas. Extra combat spells in general are gas. They're incredibly powerful, and this one's a Gruul one, and a very good one at that. Next, we have Osgood Operation Double. This is a 4-mana legendary creature, human alien shapeshifter. It's a 2/2 that says when you cast a spell, create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. You can tap it to add 1 colorless, spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact, and has Paradox. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you get to investigate. Now, Osgood is sweet because the abilities that it's doing, like tapping for mana and investigating, are 2 things you absolutely want to be doing in an artifact deck. But keep in mind, you get an extra copy of Osgood. So this is like, it actually taps for 2 mana and you can do it in like 2 different stages. And every single time you're casting a spell from exile, you get to investigate twice, all for a 4-mana creature. That's actually really solid. And then you can do token shenanigans. You can copy your tokens, make extra tokens, like there's a lot of things you can do with tokens, and you're investigating, so you're making even more tokens. I think this one's really good. It's going to be really good in certain artifact decks, and I'm very interested in trying it out in my Broodclad artifact deck. So yeah, really cool design. Next, we have Sisterhood of Karn. This is a 2-mana green creature cleric. It's a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, and it has Paradox. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, double the number of +1/+1 counters on Sisterhood of Karn. So Paradox, it just rewards you from casting stuff from somewhere else. So flashback spells and casting from exile, and it just grows. It just grows, and it grows pretty big. It doesn't have evasion, but it's just a 2-drop. So you don't really expect to see the most out of it. I don't know. It's not super exciting, but it's like, it is a beater that it's good for the precon. It like grows, and it starts as a good blocker, and then it starts as a finisher later on. That's fine. That's pretty solid. Next, we have another 2-mana green creature. This is Thijarian Witness. It's a creature alien cleric. It's a 0/4 with flash, and it has Bear Witness. Whenever another creature dies, if it was attacking or blocking alone, exile it and investigate. Well, it's interesting. I like the fact that it actually works also on your opponent's creatures. So it could work like I don't know, if you're doing like an Exalted deck or something like that, or like a sacrifice deck. You attack with 1 creature, you sacrifice it before combat is done or whatever. Then you can investigate. That's kind of cool, I guess. And it works off your opponent's creatures doing the same thing. I don't know. It's cute. I just don't think I'd put it in any decks. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section what you would do with this. Next, we have Into the Vortex, though. This is a 4-mana red sorcery with Cascade and Rebound. Very simple, very sweet, but I love the card. So for 5 mana, you just cast a spell that doesn't really do anything, but it cascades, and then lets you cast a spell from exile, triggering Paradox, and then a Rebound, so becomes exiled once you cast it, and then you get to cast it again for free on your next turn from exile, triggering Paradox again, and then you cascade again, triggering Paradox again. So it works very well with Paradox of Power, the precon that it's in, and I think this card is also just gas in like Exile Matters decks. Again, it's very very boring to say Prosper and Faldorn over and over again, but, those are the ones. It's basically just Prosper and then 1% Faldorn players, but, it's for them, right? It's for Prosper. Moving on, we have Renegade Silent. This is a 4-mana blue creature alien horror. It's a 3/3, and at the beginning of your end step, goad up to one target creature you don't control and put a +1/+1 counter on Renegade Silent, then it phases out. So this is cool. It grows, it goads, and it's very hard to remove because it basically dodges any sorcery speed interaction. It can't block, which is a little bit annoying, but you are goading, so it kind of counts as a block in that sense, like a super block that also forces people to take damage. And yeah, this card is actually really cool. I like it a lot. Just hard to deal with goad that grows into an ever-growing threat by itself and starts smashing for more and more damage. That seems really neat. I like it. Next, we have another Master card. This is the Master Mesmerist. This is a 4-mana Dimir 3/3 legendary creature Time Lord Rogue. It has tap, target creature and opponent controls with power less than or equal to the Master's power gains Skulk until end of turn, goad it. So a little bit of evasion and some goad attached to it. And whenever a creature with Skulk deals combat damage to one of your opponents, put a +1/+1 counter on the Master and draw a card. Ooh, okay. All right, so this is actually like the Skulk Matters commander. So we finally have a commander for Skulk. I don't know how many Skulk cards there are even in the format, but this is cool. It's Skulk Matters. It's tied to goad, and it's fun. It's manipulative. It draws cards. It puts counters on it. It's like the Fur Crag of skulking, which I like a lot. That's cool. Next, we have another Master card, the Master Multiplied. This is a 6-mana Rakdos legendary creature Time Lord Rogue. It's a 4/3 with Myriad, and the legend rule doesn't apply to creature tokens you control, and triggered abilities you control can cause you to sacrifice or exile creature tokens you control. So this card is actually kind of nuts all by itself. So Myriad, for those who don't know, is when you attack with a creature with Myriad, you get to make a token copy of the attacking creature with Myriad, tapped and attacking another opponent you control. So if you're attacking one opponent and you have 2 other opponents, you get to make a token for each other opponent, and one of those are attacking each one of those. Does that make sense? Did I explain it right? I explained it badly, but so there's 3 opponents, you attack with one, and then you make 2 tokens, and each one's attacking another opponent, right? Okay? And then it gets exiled, like at end of combat or end of turn. I think it's end of combat. It gets exiled. But what the Master says is, first of all, the tokens that you're making, they're legendary because they're copies of the Master, but the legend rule doesn't apply, so you don't have to sacrifice them to the legend rule. And then they don't have to be exiled after the Myriad trigger happens. So you get to keep them forever, and then you get to continue attacking and crush all your opponents, I guess. Like, that's just going to get out of hands super quickly. And that applies to all your other creatures. So you could go like full Myriad, or you can go like Voltron-y with the Master, and just keep multiplying the Master card itself. So this card is actually, I would say, the most interesting commander that we've seen previewed so far, at least to me. This is one that gets me the most excited. Yeah, this one's really cool. I like it a lot. Next, we have the Sound of Drums. This is a 3-mana red enchantment aura. It says, enchant creature is goaded, so a lot of goading in this deck. If enchanted creature would deal combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead, ooh la la. And you can pay 3 mana, 2 in a red, return the Sound of Drums from your graveyard to your hand, so you can keep enchanting stuff even as the goaded creatures are dying. This deck is about goad, and this is a really good goad aura. It's similar to like the Impetus cycle, it doesn't get value for you each time the creature is attacking, but the value there is that it deals double the damage, which is already a lot of value, and then it can return itself to your hand and you can recast it once more. I think this card is actually really gas. It's good for a goad deck, that's for sure. Next, we have another Master card, the Master Gallifrey's End. This is a 4-mana Rakdos legendary creature Time Lord Rogue. It's a 4/3, and it says make them pay. Whenever a non-token artifact creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, choose an opponent with the most life amongst your opponents. That player faces a villain's choice. They lose 4 life, or you create a token that's a copy of that card. Yeah, this one's fun. If you are in an artifact creature deck that's not focused on tokens, then you get to basically burn out the person with the highest life total, or just start getting token copies of stuff. Either way, that's pretty good value for a 4-drop. It also works very well with the Cybermen, because the Cybermen are all about like milling the top cards of your opponent's library and then getting those cards. Instead of them going to the graveyard, rather, they just go onto your side of the battlefield face down as artifact creatures. So they're not tokens, they're face down cards that are artifact creatures. So when those die, you get to exile it and then get extra value out of them. So this is a really good like Cybermen commander, and it is fun. It looks fun. Next, we have Rassilon, the War President. This is a 5-mana Dimir legendary creature, Time Lord Noble. It's a 3/4, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 2 life and exile a top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and each non-creature spell you cast from exile has Conspire. As you cast that spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. When you do, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So not only is incremental card advantage, because at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to basically draw an extra card, and you're casting it from exile, so it triggers all the Paradox stuff. If you have Paradox Matters in the deck, I mean, you don't normally have it because that's in a different precon, but if you add it to this deck, then you get extra value from those cards, I guess. And then you can double up on the spells that you're casting this way. If they're non-creature spells, that seems really good. So this is really cool for like a Spellslinger like token deck that has a lot of casting from exile, like a lot of instant sorcerers, non-creatures from exile. Oh, it doesn't have to be even Spellslinger. It could be even an artifact non-creature deck. So yeah, this card is also really cool. I like these a lot. I like these a lot more than the Doctors, actually. All the Doctors are kind of lame to me, or at least most of them were, and these are kind of cool. I like the villains a lot more. Maybe that makes me the villain. I don't know. Moving on, we have Ashad, the Lone Cyberman. This is a 4-mana Grixis legendary artifact creature Cyberman. It's a 3/3. The first non-legendary artifact spell you cast each turn has Casualty 2. So as you cast it, you may sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater. If you do copy it, a copy of an artifact spell becomes a token. And whenever you sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Ashad, the Lone Cyberman. So this is a cool Grixis artifact non-legendary aristocrat stack, which is a very cool way of taking artifacts. It kind of reminds me of Anhelo, which is also Grixis and Casualties, but it cares about instant and sorceries, and this one cares about non-legendary artifact spells. So yeah, I like it a lot. It's very cool. I like these designs quite a bit. Next, we have Cybermat. This is a 2-mana colorless artifact creature robot. It's a 2/1 with Skulk, so it works with the Skulk Master, I guess. And whenever Cybermat attacks and isn't blocked, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is a number of attacking artifact creatures. So it works well with the Cybermen. Like, the Cybermen are all artifact creatures. You can go wide with them very quickly. And it kind of helps with that. It helps with the damage, and it's Skulky, and it's very cute. Look at that art. Very cute. I love it. Next up, we have Cyber Ship. It's a 6-mana colorless artifact vehicle. It's an 8/8, which is very big, and it has flying. And whenever Cybership deals combat damage to a player, put the top 2 cards of that player's library onto the battlefield face down under your control. There's 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures. It has crew 4. So it hits really hard. It's 6 mana, which is a lot of mana. It's a lot of mana. It's your top end, but it's an 8/8 flyer, so it hits really hard. And then it fuels your Cyberman nonsense. It puts artifact creatures onto your battlefield. And they're not even tokens. They're not tokens. So they have additional synergies in the precon. It's nice. It's not super powerful, but it's a good top end for this precon. So we covered all the brand new cards that were previewed today that are in Paradox of Power and also the Masters of Evil precons. And now I'm going to go over the final reprints that you can find in the Paradox of Power precon. So these are all cards that have been printed before. They're not brand new to the set. However, each of them feature brand new art and flavor text set in the Doctor Who world. And I'm just going to quickly give some commentary of any ones that I think are particularly good or high value. And then we're going to go over the deck list at the very end. So, Vine-Glimmer Snarls. Snarls are fine. Temples are fine. Sheltered Thickets, it's fine. Rootbound Crag is a good one. Like, I always look for dual lands that enter the battlefield untapped. Those are the best ones that you're looking for. So Rootbound Crag and Rockfall Vale are both very, very good. Reliquary Tower, I always love seeing a reprint of it. It gets reprinted fairly regularly, but it's always sitting at like $3 because it's always very popular. And I really like the art of this one. I have no idea what it's depicting, but I really like the art. Game Trail, the Snarls, they're fine. Frontier Bivouac, that's good too. Dreamroot Cascade, really nice. I really like to see untapped duels. Desolate Lighthouse, I think is bad. I don't think it's a good card. You don't want to spend 4 mana to loot. Don't like it. Cinderglade, I like it. It sometimes ends up battlefield untapped. That's solid. Search for Tomorrow is a cool reprint. Growth Spiral, Farseek, Cultivate. So all your standard ramp cards. They're not expensive or anything, but happy to see them here. Throes of Chaos, nice. Think Twice, I don't think is a very good card, but it does, the flashback does trigger Paradox, which is nice. Cursed Mirror, one of the best 3 mana rocks in existence, and very, very powerful, and still undervalued, I would say. Beast Within, a staple. Then we got Snuff Out, which is a really great reprint, probably the most exciting reprint out of all of them. And it's kind of funny because I tweeted about this card actually yesterday because I just stumbled upon it while trying to build a deck, and I noticed that the cheapest version of it is $11. It was first printed as a common many, many years ago and never really got a meaningful reprint outside of a single dual deck. And it sees play in Pauper. I think it sees play in other formats, and it definitely sees play in Commander as well too. So I was asking for a reprint here, and sure enough, here we got it the very next day. So I don't know. You're welcome. Ponder, Preordain, Chaos Warp, another premium spell. And then the final card that is reprinted that we haven't covered yet, that was revealed today, is Carpet of Flowers. And this is another major reprint. I think it's like $13 or something before this reprint actually happened. And it makes a lot of sense here because even though it's very specific, it counts islands. So you need to have an opponent who's running islands. All the precons happen to be running blue. So if you run Carpet of Flowers amongst the Doctor Who precons, it's always going to be high value. It's going to be one of the most insane ramp cards that you could possibly play down. One of the best turn 1 plays for sure. So yeah, this is a great reprint to see. And then we have the full deck list of Paradox of Power. You can find the full list linked in the video description. And also, I'm going to probably sticky a comment in the video section as well. Not all the artworks here that you're seeing on the screen right now are accurate to the precon. It's just all the cards. So if you want to see all the correct artworks for all the cards, well, I covered all of them. But also, you could just click on the comment section or whatever, and you'll find the full deck list with the full cards linked as well. So yeah, that's it for today. We got all of Paradox of Power. We got a lot of cards from Masters of Evil. I think we're going to probably get the full deck list of Masters of Evil tomorrow, as well as the final precon. Or is this the final precon? No, there's one more precon, I believe, that's also Doctors or something like that. I don't know. But check back tomorrow is what I'm trying to say. So like and subscribe. Check back tomorrow, and I will have the final Doctor Who cards, a video about covering all of them as soon as they are pre-read. So until then, friends, see ya!